Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the webinar Arts and Humanities Grant Showcase for the CUNY Graduate Center. My name is Dan Seatman, and I'm on the staff of Research Foundation CUNY's Office of Award Pre-Proposal Support, otherwise known as APS. The APS office is excited to bring you today's presentation, and my colleagues Ingrid Valentin and John Sapogas will be generously assisting me with managing the webinar and answering your questions. We'd like to also thank Ayuni Sarat, Alicia Bikram, and the entire Graduate Center Research and Sponsored Programs Office for so kindly inviting us to speak. I want to lay out some context for this talk. There are lots of ways to approach an Arts and Humanities grant-seeking workshop. The emphasis could be on how to navigate the different organizational cultures and priorities of funders, from federal agencies to private foundations to nonprofits. The emphasis could also be on how to craft a compelling story in the writing itself and to persuade a funder on the project's value. But most important is answering the question, what should I even apply for? And that's what I'm focusing on today. Unlike the sciences and health fields, which are driven by investigator-initiated research, funding in the arts and humanities predominantly goes to 501c3 nonprofit organizations who do programmatic work. So I have chosen to highlight those arts and humanities organizations that are tailored for either single faculty members or are intended for faculty-led projects in academic settings. I have also chosen to cover the humanities and the arts as two separate sectors, each with their own funders to learn about. And finally, I have chosen to showcase the two funder types where I think individual faculty will have the most success: federal agencies and professional or service organization nonprofits. These two funder types have the most mechanisms in place to support faculty scholarship and creativity in academic settings, so you should attune yourself to their programs. But before we start, some quick housekeeping and an overview of the agenda. Throughout the presentation, attendees will be in listen-only mode. Your microphones will be muted. If you have questions about the presentation content, please save them for the conclusion of the talk. I will then unmute everyone, and you can ask your question directly, or you can type them into the question box on the webinar control panel. If you have other questions or concerns, feel free to type them into the chat box and direct them to the presenter's attention. You will see a handout available to you in the webinar control panel. This is today's slide deck. Feel free to save this for future use. Every grant opportunity I discuss today will be linked in the slides. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and the video will be distributed to attendees. So please don't worry if you think you missed something of value. Let's turn now to today's agenda. First, we had my welcoming remarks. Next, I'm going to explore what exactly my office, the APS office, does on behalf of faculty. Next, we're going to take a deep dive into humanities opportunities. And for the majority of the presentation, we're actually going to focus on NEH funding opportunities. And I've decided to section those as opportunities for individuals and opportunities for organizations like universities. Next, under humanities funding, I'm going to cover state humanities councils, nonprofits, professional societies, and international opportunities. Then we're going to turn to arts funding and discuss federal, state, and local arts funding. Next, we're going to turn the page and discuss other types of art funding you should be aware of, such as from service organizations, foundations, and international opportunities. Then I will leave you with some parting thoughts, and we can have some Q&A so we can discuss any lingering questions that you might have. Let me quickly describe what my office does and how we work to serve CUNY faculty. The APS office opened in December 2015 at Research Foundation CUNY, and we are a research development office. So our work emphasizes increasing the competitiveness of faculty when they submit grants and enlarging the overall capacity of the entire CUNY system to submit grants and be successful when doing so. We're dedicated to advancing a culture of research at CUNY through faculty development and grant seeking. And we try to emphasize the sharing of strategic funding opportunities that faculty or other administrators might not be aware of. We work hard to cultivate faculty collaborations for multidisciplinary initiatives, particularly around large kind of team-oriented grants. And we try to convene CUNY faculty and staff around research development best practices that they might not otherwise be aware of in their day-to-day work. That boils down to a couple of very specific services and programs that we've had in place for many years now. The first are individual consultations with faculty, researchers, and students of all disciplines and seniority levels. And we help individual faculty in their grant-seeking work at every stage of inception, from just talking through who might be the ideal prospects for funding a particular idea that you might have, to workshopping specific proposals where you have put together a one-page or even the complete proposal, and we talk about ways to improve the competitiveness and the storytelling and the cogency of the proposal before you submit it. Next, we have seminars on grant design and tactics, and this is actually one of those presentations. So we give a lot of workshops and other kinds of convenings where we talk about how to write the most effective style of grants, how to be as persuasive as possible, explaining what funders are looking for, and also how to look for and find the best funding opportunities that are well suited to the work that you're trying to do. Next, we have large targeted forums on specific themes or trends in funding. So I have a slide coming up that will show you some examples of these, but these are fairly large convenings that we tend to do about once a semester around big themes that cut across a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different faculty communities of practice. Examples of this could include how to build international collaborations, particularly in STEM and health fields. It could include how to create partnerships in your community to put together more competitive arts and humanities grants. It could be around how to pursue convergent science with a lot of different disciplines coming together to solve what they call wicked problems. So you'll see a couple examples of that in a subsequent slide. The next program we have is called the CUNY Proposal Peer Review Program. And that is where we actually enlist other experts in your discipline to provide critical reviews of grant proposals before you aim to submit them. So just as our office provides review of proposals from us as staff members who have expertise in grant writing and grant storytelling, we also have this mechanism to provide you with up to 3 reviews that comes from the perspective of your discipline, which is just as valuable, but coming at the questions at hand from a different angle. Our office also administers the funding opportunity databases that CUNY has access to, and those are called Pivot and Grant Forward. They're slightly different, but work together in complementary ways. And so I encourage you to take a look at these. You can log in with your @CUNY email address to have full access, and that's all CUNY faculty, staff, and administrators and students have access to it. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation. And finally, we have a long-standing Faculty Travel for Grant Development internal funding program. That's a program that's designed to enable faculty through travel and lodging money to meet with program officers and build relationships with them in advance of submitting proposals. Now, of course, that program is on pause right now because of the situation with the pandemic. But when it starts up again, no doubt we will be accepting applications again because we found this to be a very effective approach. You can also use this program to request money to meet with collaborators that you're working on a joint grant application with. And so if, let's say, everyone is meeting in Topeka, Kansas at an academic conference to discuss the planning around a grant proposal, then that money can be used for you to meet with your collaborators. One stipulation about this program is that you need to provide some evidence that the best outcome can't also be achieved with video conferencing. So now let's move on to give you some quick examples of prior APS workshops on strategic themes. So you can see that just a month and a half ago, we took the kinds of workshops that we do and converted them into a webinar format where we held a large convening of about 300 faculty to discuss COVID-19 research opportunities for faculty. And we covered a slew of different private foundation and federal opportunities, particularly focusing on the NSF and the NIH. And that was a great success just about a month and a half ago. And prior things that we've done include the CUNY Health Collaboration Forum, where we encouraged Japanese faculty and the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science to join us to talk about ways in which Japanese health researchers can partner with CUNY health researchers, which is also a terrific success. And you can see that we've also done arts and humanities related presentations as well. So we try to cover a whole slew of different disciplines and interest areas for faculty. Next, I just want to flag some of the proposals that we have helped CUNY faculty with that have been successful to give you a sense of the types of projects that we get involved in and the outcomes. So focusing quickly on arts and humanities specific programs, we just had a series of tremendous successes with the NEH CARES Act program opportunity, which was funding provided through the CARES Act to humanities organizations across the United States, including university. And CUNY won 4 of those grants that my office helped with. And some of those winners include John Jay with Alice in Peace, as well as Edwin Melendez at Hunter and the Center for Puerto Rican Studies. We also help in the arts and humanities with faculty applications for fellowships as well. So you can see Midori Yamamura at Kingsborough Community College. We helped her win a Mellon ACLS grant for about $40,000 for some of her research as well. So, and then you can also see some of the science and the health related examples of grant success. But I just wanted to pause for a second and highlight some of the arts and humanities ones to show you some of the successes in that area. Okay, now we're getting to the meat and potatoes of everything here. The Arts and Humanities Grant Showcase. Again, the grants that I've chosen here to showcase are targeted for individual faculty or academic institutions, and they feature annual competitions with open submission. That's important because I didn't want to show you any grant opportunities that are maybe one-offs or might be around for only a short amount of time, but rather ones that represent programs that have been here for 5 to 10 years and will probably stick around for a while. And I also decided to highlight programs in the arts and humanities with open submission, meaning there's a public posting and most everyone can apply, because there are plenty of opportunities in the arts and humanities, particularly at private foundations, where there isn't an open call for proposals, there isn't necessarily a transparent review process. So I wanted everything I show you here to be mostly open to everyone. I also want to encourage you to do spend time to familiarize yourself with Pivot and Grant Forward. Even if you don't see a grant today that interests you that I talk about, the CUNY Graduate Center has full subscriptions to both services. And I guarantee you that there will be something on those 2 services and in those databases that you think is better matched to your interests. And if you need to search more and you think that private foundations are where you may find success, you can also try Foundation Directory Online as a database. The Graduate Center Library is unique among the CUNY schools because it has a full subscription to this. Particularly this is useful because many medium and small private foundations in America don't have open competitions and they don't have websites listing how to apply and what the past awards may be. So Foundation Directory Online enables you to inspect some of their tax documents actually, specifically the Form 990, to discover the most important information about who they funded in the past, what their priorities are, and what the instructions are for submitting new requests for support. Okay, now I would like to cover the NEH grants that I would like to really flag for your attention. As you can see, I've decided, oh, sorry about that. Little slide trouble there. Okay, we're back again. So I wanted to flag a particular set of NEH grants because I've chosen these as grants that are most relevant to the kinds of scholarship that I understand the CUNY Graduate Center faculty will engage in. So I decided to divide that up into grants for individuals and grants for organizations. This is not an exhaustive list of all NEH grants, but again, ones that I think are best targeted and best suited for the work that Graduate Center faculty are doing. Before I get started on the first opportunity here, which are the NEH Summer Stipends, I do want to mention that the NEH provides a service which is almost unheard of among most arts and humanities funders and is even rare among federal agencies. Namely, if you can provide them with a draft of your proposal or your application about a month or 2 months in advance of the submission, an NEH program officer will actually take the time to kind of speak with you extensively about it, to give you a critique on the way that you're conceptualizing the project, and really take a deep dive with you to make it the best possible proposal. I know that some other program officers at other agencies do that as well, but within arts and humanities fields, the NEH really goes above and beyond to assist with this if you can get the proposal to them soon enough in advance. So the NEH Summer Stipends, they are due September 23rd, 2020, so they're coming right up. And I would call this the most sort of basic and fundamental type of NEH award for individual faculty. So this supports continuous full-time work on a humanities project for a period of 2 consecutive months. NEH funds may support recipients' compensation, travel, publication costs, and other costs related to the proposed scholarly research. So I want to direct your attention to the third bullet, which are the expected outputs, because the NEH Summer Stipend program supports the most traditional, fundamental kind of scholarly work that we're all familiar with. Writing books, scholarly articles, digital publications, translations, editions, and other scholarly resources. And the funds can be used for direct compensation for work, travel, publication costs, and other costs related to the proposed scholarly research. This program in particular prioritizes early stage research and late stage writing. And so your proposal will be especially competitive if you can show, for instance, that the early stage research you want to do, like going to an archive or a library or traveling to interview certain people, that is sort of a crucial tipping point for the success of the project. And similarly, if you can show that you already have a book in contract and you're really sort of pushing to get it across the finish line, that's another important way that you can present your project so that you can really bring it to fruition. The middle stage things are actually a little bit less competitive, where you're kind of, you know, if you're at the moment of the middle distance runner, let's say, that's probably, the summer stipend program is probably less applicable for you. The grant period for the September 23rd deadline can start as early as May 1st, 2021, or as late as September 1st, 2022. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of when you actually start your summer stipend, and that's a pretty big range of what they're defining as the summer. But the point is, when you choose to start the period, you really do need to have all the funds spent within that 2-month period. The maximum award is $6,000. So this really does function as summer salary from just provided by the NEH. And you have an average of 827 proposals submitted each year with 81 funded. And you can see that this is a very competitive opportunity with about a 9.8% success rate. Most NEH opportunities in general are about 15%. So the NEH often provides a lot of fantastic support, and they support a lot of the most kind of what we consider to be the backbone of humanities work. But because it is so flexible and there is more money on the table than most other opportunities, it's very competitive. This supports the creation of well-researched nonfiction books in the humanities written for the broad public. So this really is a lot different than the Summer Scholar Program, because the Summer Scholar Program was much more oriented towards creating works and creating outputs for other people in your discipline and for larger disciplinary conversations. But this is much more about creating books where you are trying to engage the public in thinking about different historical topics or different kind of literary topics or philosophical topics through the lens of humanities analysis. It encourages academic writers to communicate the significance of their research to the widest possible range of readers. So publications might present a narrative history. It might tell the stories of important individuals. They might analyze significant texts. They might provide a synthesis of ideas or revive interest in a neglected subject, or examined the latest thinking on a topic. And again, this is all with a general audience in mind. The allowable costs for this program will underwrite the research itself, things like time spent writing, travel, and other activities leading to the publication. And unlike the Summer Stipend program, which allows for a range of different outputs, really this is just targeted on books. The grant period, if you win, would sort of has a hard start and stop date from September 1, 2021 to the next year in 2022. And the maximum award is $5,000 a month over a 6 to 12 month period. So if you tell the NEA that this will take 9 months, then if you win, you will be able to draw down on $5,000 a month over that period. And again, this is a very competitive program with 300 proposals submitted each year. 26 are funded for about a 9% success rate. Let's chat about the NEH Fellowships now, which are due next on April 14th, 2021, so a long ways away. You have plenty of time to plan for this. This is in some ways a combination of the Summer Stipend and the Public Scholars Program. This supports individual academics whose projects embody exceptional research, rigorous analysis, and clear writing. Proposals must persuasively convey the value of the research to both scholarly and general audiences. So just as the Summer Stipend focused on scholarly or academic communities, and the Public Scholars Program focused on the general public, with an NEH Fellowship, now you're charged with being responsive to both different audiences. And unlike the Public Scholar Program or the Summer Stipend, this isn't necessarily focused on a single output. Rather, this is about NEH's investment in your career trajectory. So you don't need to propose a single book project or a single article. The kinds of outputs that you can have as a result of a plan that you present for the fellowship include things like books or peer-reviewed articles or translations and so forth. But really, the NEH is giving you money for the time that you're going to be spent. It's going to be spent in a broad sense to focus on a particular research direction or thrust. Another thing is that this program in particular encourages submissions from junior and independent scholars. And I will also note that if you're the kind of person who likes to do digital projects, there is another fellowship program that's specific to digital work. And so this is also co-funded by the Mellon Foundation. And if you go on the NEH website, you can find that fellowship information. But you should expect that most of the outputs for the NEH Fellowship that they would want to see are print or, let's say, analog and not digital. The grant period, you can request between 6 to 12 months, and please note that you will not be able to teach or do departmental service during this period. You need to focus single-mindedly on the work that you describe in your fellowship application. And the maximum award for that period is $60,000, which is pretty healthy as far as fellowship opportunities in the humanities go. This is the NEH's most competitive program. It's also the most prestigious award for individuals. Every year, the NEH receives 1,100 proposals. 79 are funded with a 7% success rate. So I strongly encourage you to go after this because it's a fantastic fellowship to receive. But at the same time, you really need to, this can't be something that is put together, 48 hours in advance. This really needs a lot of planning and intentional work. Now I want to begin to cover the NEH awards and grants that are intended for organizations. And by organizations, of course, I mean colleges and universities like the CUNY Graduate Center. So this opportunity, the Humanities Initiatives for Colleges and Universities, that due date was just last week on July 16th. And so they have yet to announce another date, but when they do, please, please keep an eye out for it. So I consider this in some ways the most basic and fundamental of the organizational grants that the NEH awards. That's because it focuses on sort of teaching and pedagogy of the humanities on the institutional level and thinking about how to change the structural ways in which the humanities are taught on your campus. So this supports the teaching and study of the humanities at institutions of higher education by developing new humanities programs and resources, including digital ones, courses, or by enhancing existing instances of the above. They must be organized around a core topic or set of themes drawn from an area in the humanities like history, philosophy, religion, or literature. So a project can't just claim to improve humanities pedagogy in kind of an abstract catch-all way. You really do need to take a theme in the humanities, a topic of established scholarly focus, and use that as the centerpiece of whatever intervention that you plan for your institution. So projects have to have broad institutional impact. The kinds of things that they're looking for are curricular pathways, bridge programs, course revisions, even entirely new degree programs, pedagogy guides, or multidisciplinary partnerships. And the kinds of outputs now are much different from the individual grants. You'll see the kinds of outputs they want include curriculum, community partnerships, faculty development programs, or teaching resources. So the grant period that you can choose between 1 to 3 years, and I listed February 1st, 2021 as a start date, but that was for the July 16th deadline that just passed. And so you can get a sense of what the review time is based on July 16, 2020 to February 1, 2021. The maximum award is $150,000, which is nothing to sneeze at. And there are no published outcome data for the main program. However, there are sub-programs for the Humanities Initiative track that are intended for HBCUs, for HSIs, for tribal colleges and universities, and for community colleges. And if we assume that those numbers hold across the different programs, it's about 45 to 50 submissions, between 7 to 10 awards, so about a 15% success ratio annually. The NEH Public Humanities projects, those are due August 12th, 2020. So hopefully if you're aware of this deadline, you are already beginning to get the wheels in motion to submit a competitive application. This supports projects that bring the ideas and insights of the humanities to life for general audiences in in-person programming. A way of thinking about this is like the organizational version of the Public Scholars Fellowship that I showed you a couple slides back. So projects must engage humanities scholarship to analyze significant themes in disciplines such as history, literature, ethics, and art history. This is an interesting program because it really is tailored for institutions like museums and galleries and historic sites, maybe historic homes that are on a registry, but as well as universities, because universities often have these kinds of exhibitions and galleries and historic sites on their campuses. So projects must be in one of 3 categories. Exhibitions, and these must, for a successful program, a successful project, exhibitions must be permanent and on view for 3 or more years. They can be temporary and single site for 2 or more months, or they can be traveling. With historic places or historic sites, they have to have interpretive programs that last at least 3 or more years, and examples include living history exhibitions or guided tours. And then there are humanities discussions. And these are symposia series, lecture series, or collections discussions, let's say related to archival materials. But for the August 12th deadline, these actually need to be related to the theme of America's 250th anniversary. And these humanities discussions must have at least 6 or more in-person public engagements. Now, of course, because of COVID and the pandemic, a lot of what will be allowed for the public humanities projects will need to be with social distancing protocols in mind, and you'd have to write with taking into account all of these considerations. So the expected outputs are actually interpretation plans and then exhibitions. And that's because there are actually 2 different tracks for this grant. The first are planning grants, and those last up to 2 years. And then there are implementation grants, and those last up to 4 years actually. So a planning grant, as you can imagine, is about getting the different wheels in motion, getting the right people on board, creating a strategy and tactics for how the exhibition or the symposia series will come together. And you can have up to $75,000 to do that. The implementation grant is actually much larger, and you can see that that's up to $400,000. And if as part of that opportunity you add a component for a public humanities position, staff position, you can request an initial $100,000. So that tips the scales at $500,000 in NEH money for a successful implementation grant in the public humanities projects, which is the largest NEH grant that is offered conventionally. So this grant track has an average of 99 proposals per year, 16 are funded typically, and there's about a 16% success rate. Now let's talk about the NEH Humanities Connections grants, and that has 2 different tracks, also called planning and implementation, and both of these tracks are due September 16th, 2020. So that's not quite as soon as the public humanities grant opportunity. You have a little bit more time to get your team together and get things in motion, but I behoove you to, see if this is the right opportunity for you. This supports innovative curricular approaches that foster productive partnerships among humanities faculty and their counterparts in the social and natural sciences and in pre-service or professional programs such as business, engineering, health sciences, law, computer sciences, and other technology-driven fields to foster new integrative learning opportunities for students. So a good way of thinking about this opportunity is it's faculty coming together to design these curricular pathways that are convergent and integrated and multidisciplinary, but at the end of the day, the outcome should be student-focused. It should be learning and pedagogy-focused. The projects have 4 core features to be successful. The integration of the subject matter, perspectives, and pedagogical approaches of 2 or more disciplines. So you must have at least one that's a humanities discipline and at least one outside the humanities, although you can have more of in either basket. There must be a collaboration between faculty from 2 or more separate departments or schools. So it could be a project that is in the Graduate Center among different GC departments. It could involve multiple CUNY schools. It could involve the GC and other schools outside of CUNY. There's also experiential learning as an intrinsic part of the curricular plan. This just means that you need to design pathways in which the students actually get their hands messy in the integrated approach or curriculum subject matter that you've put together. So the students need to have site visits to places of importance where they can learn more about the themes of how these disciplines converge. They need to be asked to collect data or analyze data that relates to the intersection of these different interests and these different disciplines. they need to be speaking with or interviewing people who sort of are the keepers of this knowledge and are sort of subject matter experts. So it can't just be purely textbook based or the way that business as usual sometimes for humanities teaching. And there needs to be long-term institutional support for the proposed curriculum innovations. So you would need to really show that the GC is gung-ho to implement this and really get it off the ground, and to make sure it's sustainable as well. So what are the expected outputs? They are linked courses, they are curriculum, community partnerships, faculty development, and teaching resources. As I mentioned, there are 2 tracks, planning and implementation. A planning grant you can have up to 12 months, and an implementation grant you can have between 1.5 years and 3 years. The awards also differ substantially. The planning grant is $35,000 maximum, and the implementation grant is $100,000 maximum. And this opportunity is about as competitive as other NEH opportunities, with a 14% success rate in the planning side, and then it becomes more competitive on the implementation side with an 11% success rate. Now let's talk about the NEH collaborative research opportunity, and that's due a little bit of a ways away, December 2nd, but it's never too soon to start mapping things out for yourself. This supports sustained collaboration between 2 or more scholars. Collaboration may be drawn from a single institution or several institutions across the United States, and up to half of the collaborators may be based outside of the United States. So let's read between the lines here. You can think of this as a different version of the Humanities Connections grants, but rather than have the collaboration be focused on student outcomes or pedagogical aims, this is much more about scholarly outcomes, creating academic communities, and creating new knowledge within communities of scholars and teachers. So it encourages projects. Oh, and let me also add, this is also a great opportunity for international collaborations in the humanities, but not just in the humanities, also with international collaborations in the natural and social sciences or in other disciplines. So it encourages projects that incorporate multiple points of view and explores new avenues of inquiry in the humanities for scholars and general audiences. So keep in mind, in how you design this project, you need to be balancing the interests of both the scholarly communities as well as engaging the general, the general folks in America in interpreting humanities topics in a more sustained way. So research may be in a single field of study or may be interdisciplinary. Projects that include partnerships with researchers from the natural and social sciences are encouraged, and partnerships with different types of institutions are welcome as also. So this is interesting because a school like the GC, which is a research university, can partner with a nonprofit museum. It can partner with a library. It can partner with an independent humanities research nonprofit. There are, sky's the limit in terms of what types of other partners you can involve with your academic research collaboration. And there are 2 different grant tracks here as well. There are convening grants and there are publications grants. Convening grants are designed for you to bring together the folks who you want to be part of your collaborative research enterprise. And you do that through the funding provided that will support conferences and workshops, seminars, and working groups. And that's so people to get together to sharpen and hone and really clarify what the chosen research topic is. And then there are publications where the NEH hopes that after you've had a convening or multiple convenings and you've really clarified what the research thrust is that you want to pursue, then the publications grants support the completion of the print or digital products that are the outcome of bringing all these amazing folks together to explore topics from an interdisciplinary angle. The convening grants are often designed to prepare a set of collaborators for publication grants. So what are the expected outputs? Depending on which track you apply for, they're different. Could be a book, a digital material or publication, or a themed issue or a peer-reviewed journal. Or if you're applying for the convening side, it could be a conference or a workshop. The convening grants last about 12 months, and the publications grants last anywhere between 1 to 3 years. The maximum award for a convening grant is about $50,000, and a publication grant can be as high as $250,000, which is not too shabby for a set of publications that need to be the outcome of this grant. This is rather competitive, again, with about 107 proposals each year. About 10 are funded with a 9% success rate. Let's talk about the Digital Humanities Advancement Grants, which are going to be due next on January 15th, 2021. I don't want to delve into what are digital humanities, because I'm going to assume that most everyone on this call are familiar with digital humanities as a methodology or as a pedagogical practice, so I'll skip past that. But this program supports these projects at different stages through their life cycles, from kind of the startup phase through the implementation and into sustainability. It prioritizes work that can scale to enhance scholarly research, teaching, and public programming in the humanities. This means that reviewers are going to be very focused on the innovation or the novelty of the digital humanities project that you're interested in. You really need to show that you are creating something that others can borrow, that others can utilize for their own projects, and that is kind of can be widely shared and really changes the conversation in the digital humanities field. Activity examples include experimental, computationally based methods, techniques, or infrastructure that contribute to the humanities. So these are things like software projects or digital tools. It can be scholarship that examines the history, criticism, and philosophy of digital culture and its impact on society. So this is a little bit more like traditional books or articles that you might be writing about digital humanities topics. Or it can be evaluative studies that investigate the impact of digital scholarship on scholarly research and pedagogy. So now this is a little bit more like a social science investigation, where you're asking a value-laden question, or you have a theory that you're investigating about how well a particular digital humanities tool works, or you're asking questions about the nature of the engagement with the tool once it's been developed. So there's a broad range of ways to come at this grant opportunity from a ton of different methodologies. There are 3 different grant tracks for this opportunity based on the level of project maturity. Level 1 supports exploratory sessions, workshops, and early prototypes and initial planning. Level 2 supports well-defined work leading to concrete and tangible outcomes. So these are working prototypes, sample data sets, models, methodological workflows. So this is sort of the midpoint of what we might consider to be a multi-year endeavor. And then last but not least is level 3 that supports the scaling and expansion of established projects. So this is really the grant stage when you've shown that your concept is successful and really has a lot of merit, and you've really you've gone through the alpha and the beta sessions, and you've worked out all the troubleshooting, and now you're really ready to get it in a lot of people's hands. You're ready to disseminate. You're really ready to get it out into the world. So the expected outputs from this opportunity include articles, digital materials and publications, workshops, reports, teaching resources, and unlike most other NEH opportunities, digital infrastructure and software. So that's a new thing. You can see that across the 3 different levels, there are different periods of grant performance. Level 1 up to 24 months, level 2 up to 36 months, level 3 up to 36 months as well. And then also the level of funding scales significantly depending on which track you apply for. $50,000 for level 1, $100,000 for level 2, $325,000 for level 3. This program averages about 115 proposals with each year, and about 17 are funded for about a 15% success rate. And I'll note that the GC has won several of these grants, actually, and so there are many of your colleagues who you can chat with and refer to for a lot of guidance on this opportunity. Let me now cover the last NEH opportunity for organizations for this conversation, which are the summer seminars and institutes for faculty, and that due date is a ways away, February 11th, 2021. This supports 1 to 4 week professional development programs that allow faculty participants to explore recent developments in humanities scholarship, teaching, and/or curricular design. So the heart of this program is really faculty professional development, either for new pedagogical innovations that you've developed and you want to share with the world, or around sort of new topics and new discoveries in the humanities that you think are really relevant to disseminate across a range of different faculty. Projects should focus on the study and teaching of significant texts and other resources. They should provide models of excellent scholarship in teaching. They should contribute to the intellectual growth of the participants and build lasting communities of inquiry and professional collaboration. So another thing you should focus on with these grants are asking, how am I creating a community of practice? How am I creating a broader scholarly network as a result of the seminar or institute I put into place? There are 2 grant types. Seminars are a little bit smaller. They're a focused environment in which 16 participants study a humanities topic under the guidance of established scholars. And then there are institutes, which allow 25 to 36 participants to study a humanities topic with a team of established scholars. And there are 2 different grant levels for both seminars and institutes. Level 1 is for first-time projects, and it really emphasizes planning. Whereas level 2 is devoted to projects that have been previously awarded and really emphasizes dissemination. The expected outputs, of course, are conferences, institutes, and seminars. And there are 2 different grant levels. Level 1 is 15 months, and level 2 is 24 months. The maximum award amount is $235,000. And the average number of proposals submitted each year is 68, with 25 funded. And I want to put a big highlight over this. Unlike virtually any other NEH program, or really a lot of other humanities programs in general, this has a whopping 37% success rate. And again, many of your Graduate Center colleagues have won this grant as well as other folks across CUNY. And so I really strongly encourage you to think hard about applying for this opportunity, because it does have such a high success rate for the number of proposals that are submitted. Now I'd like to turn the page a little bit and talk about some other humanities funding that's out there that's not just at a federal agency. And that kind of breaks down into state humanities councils, nonprofits, professional societies, and international opportunities. And this isn't the whole range of money that's out there, but it's really what I think is most salient for individual faculty like yourself to consider. So every state has its own humanities council that funds humanities projects in that state's borders, and New York is no different because it has Humanities New York. And this is a fantastic organization that does a lot more than just make grants, but Humanities New York does make grants, and the largest grant they provide is about a $5,000 award called an Action Grant, and that link there goes directly to the Action Grant page. And the Action Grants are very specifically focused on public engagement. You'll find that a lot of the state and the local money for humanities work is less about funding scholarship and those kinds of outputs, and it's more about engaging general audiences in humanities topics. So the NEH kind of sets itself apart among federal, state, and local funding by also giving a lot of money for books and scholarly articles and things like that. Then there are academic nonprofits and foundations. These are organizations that really take it upon themselves to strengthen the fabric of humanities scholarship by awarding things like fellowships and residencies and other awards of that nature. The first bullet, those are examples of organizations, and it's not exhaustive, but these are examples of organizations that support the humanities, who are themselves nonprofits and are themselves grant seekers, and places like Ford or Mellon or Kresge will give them large grants that they then dole out in smaller increments to academic faculty like you. So those links I provided are directly to the fellowship pages of those nonprofits, and I strongly support you taking a look at those to see what's applicable. Then there's also private foundations like the Gladys Kriebel Delmas Foundation, or the Bellagio Center Residency at the Rockefeller Foundation, or the Camargo Foundation. And those are private foundations where they have chosen funding priorities for their grant making that really centers in on humanities scholarship and sort of new knowledge creation outcomes. And again, they do that work primarily through residency and fellowship opportunities. Then there are the service and the professional societies. And everyone on the call is probably familiar with some of these at least. And you know, you might even belong to several of them, maybe even some that are even up here on the page. And these service and professional societies are typically about strengthening the work of a certain discipline in the humanities, or they work at the intersection of multiple disciplines, or they try to support you know, particular underrepresented identities in the humanities as well. So the first bullet is focused on organizations where there is a convergence of different disciplines, like the American Association of University Women or the ACLS. And the second bullet lists some of the professional societies that make fellowships and residency grants that are much more narrowly focused on particular disciplines, like the Latin American Studies Association or the American Musicological Society. And then finally, there are international opportunities that you should be aware of and attuned to. The first bullet lists a couple US-based organizations that promote international exchange in the humanities. And you can find a fantastic list of societies and organizations that do that kind of work when you click on the link for the Council of American Overseas Research Societies, of which the American Academy in Rome and the American Academy in Berlin are examples. And then there are also, there's also international funding available from the foreign governments themselves to have US-based researchers come over and do humanities scholarship at their colleges and universities. So an example of that would be the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation in Germany, or the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, of course, in Japan. Next, I want to talk very quickly about federal, state, and local arts funding and how that plays out and what you should be attuned to. So you'll notice that I gave a deep dive on the NEH, but I did not give a similar amount of depth for the National Endowment for the Arts, and that's simply because the NEA makes very, very few grants to individuals. As an agency, the vast majority of its funding goes to 501c3 nonprofit organizations, and on top of that, very few of its grants are made to universities or to higher education. Most often, you'll see NEA money go into places like a campus's performing arts center. The reason for that is the NEA was criticized heavily in the 90s for giving money to controversial artists who were individual artists, and so the fix was instead to give it all to nonprofit organizations who might have better control over the type of art that was being made. So I do want to list a couple opportunities from the NEA, though. The first two are intended for individuals, and that's the creative writing fellowships and the translation projects. So if you're in either of those disciplines, or that's the nature of some of your work, I strongly encourage you to click on those. But then of particular relevance to higher education are the research grants in the arts. And these are actually grants that the NEA provides through their research division, where they accept proposals that do social science research asking about the nature of participation in the arts, or the outcomes that individuals or communities experience in the arts, as well as things like health or physiological or mental health outcomes that are tied to arts engagement. So it really is about asking evaluative questions, theory-driven questions that look at things like data sets or studies, really running research projects. So that might be of interest to a few of you, but those are probably few or far between. Next, I'd like to talk about the New York State Council on the Arts, or NYSCA. NYSCA similarly focuses a ton of its funding on 501c3 organizations, much in the same way that the NEA does. However, they do have an individual artist grants program for things like commissions for new works of music, for theater productions, for dramaturgical projects, for dance projects, for film projects, and so forth. I do want to caution you, however, you do need to have a fiscal sponsorship in order to apply to these opportunities. So you need to work with an organization like the New York Foundation for the Arts, or you need to work with Fractured Atlas, or an organization like that in order to submit a proposal. And unfortunately, the proposal process is the same grant or contract process that every contractor in New York State goes through. So it's a bit arduous if you are an individual artist. But the flip side of that is they actually don't get very many applications to this program, because if you can actually suffer through it and submit an application, you're in a relatively small pool. So that is something for you to consider, especially if you would like a commission to make a new artistic work. Where the vast majority of government-based funding makes its way to individuals is with the local arts councils. Each borough in New York City has its own arts council, and they're staffed by fantastic individuals who really have an understanding of the grassroots arts activities in their borough. And this is where you can get grants of between, I would say, $5,000 to $20,000 to do public engagement activities, to have performances, to commission new works, to have educational residencies, things of that nature. So I really strongly encourage you to check out your local arts council as the maybe the lowest hanging fruit for getting government funding for artistic activity. Let's quickly cover other arts funding that is not based in government support. And what I want to flag for you are service organizations, private foundations, and international opportunities. So service organizations are private nonprofits that have to go and compete for grants just the same way that other entities do. But a lot of the time, they exist to strengthen a particular discipline. So for instance, Dance NYC is devoted to creating opportunities for the dance community in New York. Chamber Music America, actually my former employer, is dedicated to supporting small music ensembles across different genres. And then there are also some service organizations that fund the arts across multiple different disciplines. Those include New York Foundation for the Arts or the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation. And, again, other service organizations have a mission such as an explicitly social justice lens, for instance, A Blade of Grass. So depending on what your disciplinary focus is, these are all fantastic sources to get a substantial amount of support for your work. Another type of entity I want to flag is called a community foundation. And a community foundation is essentially a series of donor trusts that have been set up to do grant making that supports the interests not so much of a particular discipline or a particular artistic style, but to support a regional community. Many different American cities have community foundations, and sort of larger regions have community foundations. And the New York Community Trust is ours, and they make substantial grants in arts settings. They don't make as many grants covering things like humanities topics, because I think humanities work is so much more scholarly based rather than being focused on performance and commission and creation. So if you are an artist, I strongly encourage you to look at the Community Trust and particularly their arts and culture funding emphases to get a sense of what's out there for you. Next, of course, are private foundations. And while a ton of private foundations make their grants to 501c3 nonprofit organizations in the arts, the list here are some examples of private foundations that make grants to individuals in the arts. And this is not an exhaustive list, but places like the Andy Warhol Foundation or the J.S. Guggenheim Memorial Foundation or the Leeway Foundation each have different emphases on what types of individual artists they want to support. For the Andy Warhol Foundation, it's visual artists. For the Jerome Foundation, it's what they define as early career artists. For the Leeway Foundation, the emphasis is on supporting woman-identified and trans artists. So there are private foundations out there that will make grants to individuals. They're just fewer and far between. And then, of course, there are international opportunities. The first two in the initial bullet, like CEC ArtsLink and Asian Cultural Council, these provide grants for cultural exchange, and they are US-based organizations. And so they are ones that will provide the money for you to travel abroad, to do the exchange work, and to create new pieces of art or pursue collaborations, but they're based domestically. And then the second bullet covers organizations that are typically funded or actually a part of foreign governments supporting collaboration and engagement with between United States artists and artists from their home country. So for instance, the French-American Cultural Exchange, the Brazilian Consulate in New York, the Japan Foundation, and a lot of these organizations are based in New York City, but they encourage these kind of transnational collaborations, and particularly they will fund projects if you're creating art or even if you're doing kind of humanities research that promotes or explores the culture of their home nation. So now I just want to provide you with some parting thoughts as we reach the end here, and thank you so much for your patience. We are just about at the hour mark. I'd like to strongly encourage you, please consult with my team and I, the app staff. And you can see the direct email there. Any emails you sent to apps@rfcuny.org will go directly to all of our inboxes, and we'll get back to you momentarily. Or interface with your sponsored programs office. I know that Iuni and Alicia and the team over there are incredibly helpful and responsive, and that link there goes directly to the GC sponsored programs and research office page, is particularly their list of funding opportunities. So please lean on us. That's what we're here for. Also, please consider projects that blend your scholarship or art with very urgent, relevant topics. Things like COVID-19, things like systemic racism. I know that particularly in the humanities, there's a hesitation to take on topics that are too present, that are too close in the rearview mirror, where we don't have enough reflective distance to really get enough perspective to feel comfortable creating scholarship about it. But I have to urge you that the more timely and socially relevant your proposed topic is, the more excited that panelists and the NEH and others will be to fund it. Also, don't wait to hear about funding on the grapevine. Again, please use Pivot and Grant Forward to discover grants. You can see recent webinars that were tailored precisely for CUNY on how to use Pivot and Grant Forward at those two links that I provided there. And and these two pieces of software actually have a feature where if you set up the parameters of the types of grants you're interested in, then you can get weekly or daily email updates when new grants appear that meet those criteria. So you can kind of set up a search once and then forget it and then just keep getting updates. It's super easy to use, and I strongly encourage you to take the time to set it up. Please stay tuned for more upcoming webinars on CUNY's funding opportunity databases. I'm going to do another one in August 2020, and please stay tuned to learn more about it from the GC Office of Research, because they will announce that. Please make sure to grab this slide deck in the handout section of the webinar panel, because that has all of the links that I've just discussed. And then finally, I really encourage you, take the webinar assessment survey that will appear the moment that this session ends, and let us know what you think. If we could have designed this better, if we could have covered other content. We really do pay close attention to how you think this went. So with that, that is what I wanted to share with you guys, and I would love to open the floor to Q&A.